Hello everyone. Okay then, in this recording, and probably a second recording, we're going to have a look at money and political parties. Now, I suppose the main theme of this lesson is going to be basically, is it wrong or undemocratic for political parties to receive money? And what regulations have been put in place to try and prevent money being used, to buy political influence. And then thirdly, you need to know the arguments to say that we should get rid of our current system and actually go for a system where the state gives the money to political parties instead. So normally this is done in lessons. So normally I get you to think about in pairs why parties need money. Obviously we can't do that. So just to go over some of the main reasons, obviously political parties need money in order to pay for election leaflets, in order to pay for staff because they have full-time staff working for political parties. They might need money in order to transport party leaders and stuff around the country to meet voters. So money is really important for political parties. It enables them to campaign. It enables them to function between elections. Now, looking at the exam, because everything we do is linked to this exam, as you well know, the types of question you could be asked directly regarding party funding. So you might be asked, is money the most important factor determining the success for a party? You might be asked, is money a big reason why the UK has a two-party system? Um, should the UK have state funding of political parties, or is the current way the best one? It also, by the way, could be part of an answer. It could be a paragraph of a question along the lines of, does the UK have a democratic deficit? Because you might argue the UK does, because parties are funded by a few big donors and therefore they don't have to take as much notice of people with less money. When we come to Unit 3 about US government and politics, which is a comparative paper, there could very well be a question comparing the US and the UK and the different ways in which both countries have tried to deal with money and politics and the potential problems. Okay, so before we look at what parties spent their money on in recent elections, there have been a number of scandals regarding money. Actually, no, we'll come back to the moment or two. Let's go through this bit first, then look at the scandals. So, what do parties spend their money on? So, this graph here shows you from 2001 onwards, so 2001, 5, 10, 15, and 2017, what parties spend their money on. So unsolicited material, which is the light blue one at the top, that's direct mail. When you've had letters from, say, David Cameron or from Ed Miliband or from Labour in general to your address. Advertising, that could be things like billboards and that type of stuff. Market research, rallies, you can see them all on here. And you can see basically that 2005, quite a lot of money was spent, and it has been going up. So it's roughly, isn't it, about between 35 and 40 million pounds a year is spent by the main parties in on those general elections. Just to put this into context, by the way, when we do the US next year, I think in 2020 about $5 billion was spent in the US on their election campaign, which puts our 36, 37 million quid into some kind of context. Even so, 37 million quid is more than I've got. So the question then comes from, where do they get their money from? They don't get the money from the state, i.e., the UK state does not fund these parties. They get it from private donors. So this is something I found for 2015, which just shows you where money comes from. So Labour, you can see they got about 5 million quid from donations, so people donating money to the Labour Party. 5 million from membership, so when you join a party you have to pay a membership fee. Labour got close links with the trade unions, so again 7.9 million there. By government grants, opposition parties get what's called short money, and that's to allow them to be an effective opposition, to do research on government policy and to find weaknesses and stuff. So I think that's mainly what that government grant is. Fundraising, commercial activities. Conservatives, you can see they got a lot from donations and very little from membership, which might suggest either they don't have many members or they don't charge the members very much to be members. And then the Liberal Democrats, again, you see how they don't have near as much. So you can see here that Labour had £33 million, Conservative 24 million, and Lib Dems only 6.4 million. And again, there's a difference there between the two big parties and the smaller parties, which again might link into this point about, why do small parties not do very well? Regarding donations, okay, again, you can see here very clearly how the Conservatives in particular benefit a lot from donations. Labour don't do too badly, and then you kind of go down as things go on. And this again might suggest there's a problem with UK democracy, because if most money is being given to Conservatives and Labour, that might suggest why Conservative and Labour tend to do so much better in terms of seats they win in elections compared to all the other parties. Okay, so again, it links into this two-party system which Britain has. Because Britain has two big parties, they get most of the money. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you like. Here's some of the donors in 2017. So you can see that the Conservatives tend to have individuals, apart from JCB, who give money to their parties. People like Mr. David Bramlow, Mark Bumford. I don't know who these people are. You could easily find out. Whereas Labour's money, as you can see, has come largely from trade unions. Unison, for example, has about 1 million members. The CWU, and then the big union which donates a lot of money to Labour is Unite the Union. Again, this might highlight a problem. If Labour is so reliant upon Unite the Union for money, are they going to upset Unite the Union? Probably not, because they know if they upset Unite the Union, they're going to miss out on over £4 million of cash. And that could be, catastrophic for the party in terms of its money and funding. The leader of Unite the Union, Les McCluskey, is a close friend and ally of Jeremy Corbyn. He's actually shown some discontent at Keir Starmer and what's happened to Jeremy Corbyn. So again, it does show that parties that become reliant on, in this case, Unite the Union and the GMB, or for the Conservatives, JCB and John Armitage, they can, if they're not careful, become captives to these people or groups with lots of money, especially if they become very reliant upon them. In terms of membership fee, we've already looked at this. You can see the Scottish National Party actually get most of their money, 45% of their money comes from membership. The Greens also, just over a third of their money comes from membership as well. Very little from the Conservatives. And again, you might argue, if you get lots of money from members, that might show, I can imagine that'd be quite small donations from members, I would have thought. It might actually got quite a broad base of support, and therefore might show that democracy is actually okay in Britain. Okay, there's a couple of questions there to have a think about regarding membership money. Okay, now before we look at the laws, there's been a number of scandals involving money and around campaign issues. This first one I'm going to show you, it's a little clip I've got. It's about 3 or 4 minutes long. So what I'd like to do is to watch this clip. It's about Robert Jenrick, and then I'll tell you the work I want you to do from the textbook. So this is a report from Sky News, and I think it was February this year, somewhere around there. This was the latest scandal we have regarding money and political parties.
Once home to the printing presses for the Daily Express and Daily Telegraph, the West Ferry printers site in London's Docklands is at the centre of cash for favours allegations, which have forced the Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick, to publish details of his contacts with the developer, former Express newspapers owner Richard Desmond, after they met at a Tory dinner. The disclosure that Mr Desmond gave the Conservative Party £12,000 2 weeks after Mr Jenrick approved the £1 billion scheme to build 1,500 flats on the 15-acre site prompted Labour to demand in a Commons debate publication of all correspondence, texts and emails about the development. The minister said he'd release all relevant information.
These documents show, contrary to the wild accusations and the baseless innuendo propagated by the honourable gentleman opposite and restated today in a series of totally inaccurate statements and comments, this was a decision taken with an open mind on the merits of the case.
Mr. Jenrick says the dinner was the first time he'd met Mr. Desmond, who had invited him on a site visit, then sent him a number of text messages and tried to contact him by phone. On reflection, he would not have exchanged numbers, he wrote. But in a cordial text to Mr. Desmond on the evening of the dinner, November the 18th last year, Mr. Jenrick said, "Good to spend time with you tonight, Richard. See you again soon, I hope." Mr. Desmond replied, "Thanks, Robert. I really appreciate your text. We'll call your office tomorrow to arrange. Very best." But by December 23rd, Mr. Desmond appeared impatient, texting, "We've got to get the approval before January the 14th, otherwise payment of £45 million to Tower Hamlets, meaning we have to stop and reduce social housing." And on January the 9th this year, one housing department official emailed another saying, "On timing, my understanding is that the Secretary of State is or was insistent that decision issued this week, i.e. tomorrow, as next week the viability of the scheme is impacted by a change in the London regime."
Far from closing down the conversation with Mr. Desmond, Mr. Jenrick initiated a conversation with him the very next morning by text. And it's clear from the documents that Mr. Jenrick rushed through this decision on the 14th of January deliberately so he could help Mr. Desmond avoid paying £30 to £50 million in tax.
But the government is closing ranks around Mr. Jenrick over the West Ferry scheme. Cabinet Secretary Sir Mark Sedwill says the Prime Minister considers the matter is closed. John Craig, Sky News.
So you can see there the basic allegation, can't you? The man in charge of planning applications in the UK, the Secretary of State, sat next to a Conservative Party donor, Richard Desmond. Richard Desmond has this really big development in London. However, he wants to try and avoid paying this £40 million tax for social housing if it doesn't get approved until a certain date. Robert Jenrick approves this development before that date. And then Richard Desmond donates £40,000 to the Conservatives. Now, whether anything happened there, was there a link between the decision to giving the planning permission and the £40,000? We don't know. But you can see where those allegations come from. And this is the problem, isn't it, with money and parties? Why do people give money to political parties? Think back to when we did about the Blair stuff, and about how Bernie Ecclestone gave that £1 million to Labour. Bernie Ecclestone wanted to keep tobacco advertising on his Formula 1 cars because he makes money out of it. Labour get rid of tobacco advertising in all sports apart from Formula 1. And of course that led to that scandal which so undermined Tony Blair in his first year. So money is a big issue. And as a consequence of this, there's been some laws passed by the Labour government under Tony Blair to try and deal with money and campaign finance. So what I'd like to do is to read the Edexcel textbook and answer the questions in your work booklet about the regulations which they put in. And I'll now do a second video where we'll look at some other issues around this particular law.